I think we're live. Oh, hello everyone. Well, um, and I'm a little nervous, but let's go. My name is João Malheiros, and today I'm gonna be presenting the. We're gonna talk about Propshaft, the new asset pipeline for real estate. And I like the quote that is simple and clean, and that's it. And a huge shout out to CodeMiner for giving me the space to talk about it. And let's go. Let's just start it. First, we're gonna divide this brown bag in three sections. I think that was easier this way. The first one, we're gonna talk about general concepts. The second one, we're gonna talk about the Rails asset pipeline, what it is and what it does and everything. And at least but not last, we're gonna talk about Propshaft. And it's the last part of our brown bag and the main reason why we're here to talk about it, the new asset pipeline for Rails 8. Before all of this, let's talk about me. Well, I am João Malheiros, mostly known as Malheiros, and I'm a software developer. I work mostly with Ruby on Rails, but I also work with JavaScript and TypeScript when needed. I also have a life, so I have some hobbies like RPGs, sports, anime and manga, music, and I really love my fiance, my cat, and my family and friends. That's me, and this is one of the best photos that I have. And we're here because we're here for those who come after. I think it's important to learn from the community and give it back to the community. Without talk more, let's go with first the general concepts, a small knowledge needed for this brown bag. So we're just gonna lay the bricks for after that we can build a house. A web page, it's the core of the internet. I think it's one of the most simple things that we have on the internet, and it's made of HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and media files. And right now, these files together, they give us what we know as a web page. It's also important to talk about HTTP1, that it was the first version of the HTTP protocol. It's slow. It was slow because, and one of the things that happened is that we needed more than one request to grab all the components for the web page. First HTTP request was to get the HTML, and the sequential HTTP request was to grab the CSS, JavaScript, media files. In the version 1.0, we have different connections, so it was even slower. In the 1.1 version, we had a keep alive connection, so it was faster, but it was slow at the same time because we still needed to make sequential requests, like finish the one, then goes the next one, and goes the next one, and that's it. Now we're going to talk about CSS and JavaScript, but more of a perspective related to the web page. When we are when we are programming, when we are working on development, we abstract the CSS and JavaScript, creating separated files that we aggregate based on context. So, for example, we have the articles, the authors, and the navbar CSS. They are separated files that has some CSS aggregated based on the context. In this case, like we have the CSS for the navbar, the CSS for the authors, CSS for the articles, and that's how we like to work. Separated files. Okay, but remember me talking about the sequential HTTP requests? For performance, it's better to send a one file with everything. That means only one HTTP request for that resource. So it's a common practice that we have an application CSS that's gonna have all the CSS of these other files. And that's the best for performance. just one file. So we have a problem here. How can we work with CSS, JS, and other files having them organized on development so I can abstract them, I can have different files for different contexts, and optimize the production that I only send one file with everything that I need and in the best way possible so I make my web page faster. The solution that on the Rails team found was the Rails asset pipeline. And here we start the second session. We're going to talk about the Rails asset pipeline and how it worked, what it does slash did, because we're going to talk mostly about the old asset pipeline before Propshaft. But first, let's start with what is the asset pipeline. The asset pipeline provides a framework to concatenate and minify or compress JavaScript and CSS assets. It also adds the ability to write these assets in other languages such as CoffeeScript, SAS, and ERB. Let's go to the simple version. The asset pipeline concatenates, minifies, and preprocess everything. And these three processes made it possible so we can work with CoffeeScript, with SAS, with ERB, and other abstractions on the development side without having to worry about optimization on production. Uh, the asset pipeline grants me that I'm going to have one file sent to the browser in the best way possible. And that's the magic of it. I can write these things however I want, and they are going to send it the best way that it can. Let's, and it's a magic. It's magical, but it's not exactly magic. It's just process and work it in different steps. The first step is the concatenation. We combine multiple files into a single file. For example, the navbar CSS articles and the outer CSS that we spoke before, they are all combined on application CSS. Like we concatenate strings as well, like just put one after the other, after the other, and after the other. We're gonna have all the CSS for that project in just one file. There's an example. I made this image, just simple image. Like you can see that we have two different files. The navbar CSS that has one CSS characteristic, no attribute. Like I'm changing the color of the body, and I also have the article CSS that is changing the color for some header text. After I concatenate it, we're gonna only have the application CSS. This is the one that's gonna be sent to the browser, that is gonna be requested and sent, and he's gonna have both characteristics from the both files because he's gonna aggregate these both files in just one, gonna unite them. On older Rails projects, we have the manifest files. It is an example like the asset JavaScript application.js. And in these files, you have the files libraries that will be loaded to generate the application.js file. So on the old asset pipeline versions, on older Rails projects, we could also like say what we wanted to be concatenated, what we wanted to be put on the application.js, on the application CSS. So, for example, let's say that I'm developing something and I need to make a deploy, but I don't want this CSS to go in production right now. I can change my application CSS, I can change my application.js, my manifest files to just load what I want. It's a part of control that is important for our development and we handling different environments. The next step is the minification. It removes all necessary characters from CSS without changing how it works. This includes deleting spaces, comments, line breaks, and shortening things. I think this is just magic to me because this part is the one that I remove anything unnecessary. unnecessary at all. Let me go to the example. For example, I had this JavaScript code, and this one after becomes this, and this is an these are minor changes. Like you can see that some spaces that could be removed are gone, some line breaks are gone, and everything. But this is just a sample version. We have another one that is this one. It's impossible to read this. We all know that it's impossible to read this. Uh, but this is how a minified code is sent to the browser. And this part is important because it saves space. One other implication of this, we also have some, like we're just talking about minification. We are just removing the spaces and line breaks and everything that is unnecessary. But we also have a process called obfuscation, where I change name of variables, where I change name of functions and everything, and I make um, my source code almost unreadable. It's unreadable for human eyes, and obfuscation takes it to a next level, but it is used to make it harder to make it harder the the deminification of some source files that contain like um, core code for some applications. Let's say that you have a project that the core of it needs to be sent to the browser because it's a JavaScript function and everything. And obfuscation, minification make it a little more protected. It's not the best protection that it has, but just make it harder for other people to understand it and then to replicate it. So um, for some projects, this is really important. Right? Most of the time, when we're talking about asset pipeline, we're just talking about removing unnecessary parts of the JavaScript and CSS code to make it smaller. So we can send smaller, um, we can send smaller files. The last one is the pre-processing. We compile the code from advanced languages like CSS, SCSS, and SAS into regular CSS that browsers can understand. So before browsers had more limitations, and we have like CSS and SAS, and we have variables. We're talking about CSS and SAS, but we also have Tailwind and other um, resources that we just it's just good to it's just good to work on it. It's just make our life easier. But pre-processing takes it and makes it pure CSS or pure JavaScript, the vanilla versions that are understood by browsers. So it's important. So it's another step that grants us that we can work on the best way that we can with abstractions and everything. But on the browser side, I'm gonna have everything running as it could be. The last part of this process that is important, another thing that the asset pipeline goes, and it's the last part of it, is the fingerprinting that enables caching. So I add a hash to the compiled files, and this hash is unique based on the version of that file. And this way I can identify if the file has changes, and if it doesn't, I can load it faster via caching instead of making a new request. We have an example here that I have the app.js that it has a fingerprint. In this case, the fingerprint is one. And every time that is loaded, I can pull it via caching. But at the moment I update the app.js, so I have a new version. It's the app2.js. And the app2.js is a new version that I do not know. So I finally go fetch it on the browser, and then I fetch it on the server, and then I cache it again. This make our page loading very faster, and we are just gonna load things that have been changed. I do not need to worry about, for example, CSS that has not been changed and everything. And this is all of this enables us to have an optimized, as I've been saying a lot, as an optimized and optimizing it requests to the from the browser to the server. So I have a page that loads faster, and most of the time it's really important that because right now we love fast things. We are accustomed to fast things. So if then my page doesn't load fast enough, uh, I'm not gonna spend some time on it. I'm gonna think it's broke. So all of these things are important to the speed that my app loads on the web. To finish this section, I brought a little of the assets handling libraries over the years. I think it's important to talk about this because a lot of has changed. And before Rails 3, we had the static files. It was on a public, they were put on a public folder and everything. So I needed to generate by myself and then push to the web. And Rails 3.1 introduced sprockets. That was the main library that we used. That was the first asset pipeline that did the minification, the concatenation, the preprocessing, and everything for the web. But Sprocket's problem was that it tried to do so much, and the JavaScript, the CSS scenario are always changing. So it it was very difficult to update everything from Sprocket because he handled everything. He handled JavaScript, he handled CSS. It was really messy. What happened is that when we got to Rails 6, we loaded the Webpacker via default because the Webpacker was a a core library that was always being updated and everything. So it was just easier to trust in a external service to do this. In Rails 7, we started using CSS bundling for CSS because we now have Bootstrap, Tailwind, Booma, Dart Sauce. We have a lot of different libraries that are changing, and Sprocket was outdated. I put the Chakapacker version here because remember that I say that Webpacker was reliable and was updated by other persons. Okay, so it's not anymore. But some people forked it and turned it to Shakapacker. That is the updated version of Webpacker. So a lot of people migrated to Shakapacker, but it showed again a problem that I have a lot of libraries. I have a lot of things that are changing so much. And if I'm gonna put an access pipeline to do this, it's just it's a thing that I need to keep updating and updating and updating, and it's like the whole JavaScript. Yes, I'm talking about the JavaScript community that they are always having new things. That is the complete opposite that what Rails wants. That is to be stable. So starting Rails 7, we started to load JSS via import map. I'm gonna talk a little more about it later. And right now on Rails 8, we have Propshaft. That's the new asset pipeline. So let's keep going. Propshaft, a new era begins. Last session of our brown bag is going to talk about Propshaft, what it does, what it doesn't do. I think it doesn't do a lot of things, and it's good to see that. And how it works well with other stuff. First, why a new library? Just because it's simple. Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. That was said by Leonardo da Vinci, but we have a lot of we can have a lot of quotes that talk about simplicity. And simpler is easier to fix, simpler is faster, simpler a lot of times is better. Evolutions enabled Propshaft to be simpler. So right now we have the HTTP2. We do not need to send just one file anymore. So we don't. We still can do concatenation, but it's not needed as it was on the Sprockets era. Right now, JavaScript ES6 is the new default. So a lot of the Pre-processing that we need to do related to JavaScript is not needed anymore. Even Internet Explorer, I think it's version 11, used the ES6, so a lot of the pre-processing that I need to do is just not needed. And we're going to talk about import maps. Import maps I do not need for bundling. I do not need for the dependencies and the load that I needed to do before. And right now it's supported by a lot of browsers. So browser evolution and internet evolution in general enabled Propshaft to be simpler, enabled the asset pipeline to be simpler, because um, it does a lot of less. It does a lot less than Sprocket. Sprocket was too ambitious, while Propshaft is way simpler. Let's start talking about what Propshaft does, and after that, we're gonna talk about what Propshaft has removed. First things first, the configure load paths. So right now, Propshaft will keep a track of the asset load paths from both the app and Railsgen plugins. And I can, I do not need for, I can control over the loading order of the files within the HTML and the out files that are files that we write it. So we are gonna work on this. I do not need a separate file to just specify how I'm gonna load things, or I do not need for automated dependency management tools. By default, I do not need for package.json or yarn lock to say the what I need to load in each and what order I need. Right now, I'm the one that is gonna put this, and it's good to have this control because I think you all know. I think you all have seen at least one or two times that my package JSON had a lot of stuff, a lot of dependencies. So it's a good thing that I am now able to control over the loading order. I do not need automated dependency management tools. Digest stamping. And as I said, finding the load paths will be digested and copied in the public directory. Right now, I still have the fingerprinting, but I can enable longer caching. I think that's it. Like the least the less times that the more that I fetch from the server, the more that I took time to load. So more cache is something good. Development server. Propshaft will run a development server inside of Rails, allowing developers to run bin Rails without a proc file. Um, Recently, I think I knew two people that had a problem with proc file related to Tailwind on development server. So it's simpler to run local. It's simpler for me to test stuff and to develop. And on the end, basic compilers. Propshaft will allow to basic compilation steps, such as replacing URL strings in CSS files with suggested URLs. So this is important because it's a feature, but it's Propshaft saying I'm simpler. I cannot do a lot of stuff, but I can do the basics, and I can do the basics in a good way. So that's it. That's what Propshaft does in general. It does the basics of the asset pipeline, and like the steps to to delivering the optimization, but in a simple way. It does not do a lot. And here are the other changes. I think this is the best part to talk about. So I don't know things that have been removed from the asset pipeline because it was doing too much. The translation and most of the I do not need to transpile JS anymore. Of course, if I'm gonna work with TypeScript and other stuff, I'm gonna need it. But in general, if I'm working with vanilla JavaScript, I do not need translation anymore, so it has been removed. Bundling, the concatenation also has been removed because the second version of HTTP allows me to send stuff, allows me to send more than one file. And I also removed the compression. Right now, this is done mostly on the browser, so I do not need to compress stuff anymore. And Propshaft does less. That's it. It's simpler, does less, but because it does less, it does faster. I have less bugs, I have less issues, I have more things done by the browser, and it's especially on the simple. It's like a good cheese sandwich. Like a good cheese sandwich only has like bread, butter, and cheese. It's simple, but good ingredients make it good. And Propshaft is like that. Oh, that's a good question. I'm gonna talk about it on the end. Let's keep going. And since it does less, but we are still need to do some stuff. I have more if you need more power. We have these four libraries that does more if you need more power. We have the JS bundling, integrates modern JavaScript bundlers into our Rails application. So if I need to work on with TypeScript, if I need to work with Webpacker or Bun, I use it because it allows us to connect with popular JavaScript bundlers. We have the CSS bundling that is the same as the JS bundling, but with CSS. So if I want to work with Bootstrap, Booma, PostCSS, Dart Sass, or anything else to make CSS more enjoyable to be worked with, I can use the CSS bundler. The Tailwind CSS Rails right now is the default. It's a wrapper to the Tailwind CSS, and what it does is that I can work with Tailwind CSS, but as a standalone version. Which I do not need Node.js to run it. I don't need other JS dependencies to work to run it. It's different from the CSS bundling because it's specialized to Tailwind. And we talked about it, the import map that enables a node-free JS approach to manage JavaScript in Rails applications. That's right now is the main core to handle JS in the Rails 8 version. So Propshaft only works mostly with assets like CSS and media files. That is the core of it. And that's what I wanted to show today. Like, this is the end of my presentation. Thank you. And about the questions. Renan asked about if the browser does more stuff, in this case, wouldn't that impact the SEO? Um, so the browser does more stuff related to the assets management, but the page SEO and the descriptions still are done on the. It still can be done on the Rails server. So, for example, when I say the browser does more, is because right now it does the what it is. Right now it handles more connections. Right now it handles a better version of JavaScript that we work with a lot. And I also do not need to have a lot of bundling because import maps enable a node-free version. But related to the SEO, I still have my descriptions. I still can have my HTML files as I want to, because import maps are gonna work with the simple like ERB and the most common abstractions of the that we use on Rails. And when we talk about SEO, we always need. I have the feeling that we always need another library to work with this because I don't know. I think Rails does a good job, does a simple job with SEO, but I think you always need something else to make it a good SEO. And I also put my reference here, and I'm gonna make the slides available. But this is what I have for today. Does anyone has any other questions? I think not. So that's it. I'm gonna close things, and I think that's it for today.